The 2020 New Testament Challenge, which we just finished, actually began more than a year ago. In September of 2019, I had an accident and I was in the hospital. As I was laying there in bed, I was praying that God would speak to me and show me what He wanted me to do as I start that new year of 2020. As I was reading the Bible, God spoke to me from Hebrews chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. This is what those verses say. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that no one may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. As I read those verses, it's as though those verses came alive to me and God was speaking to me, giving me the direction that I was asking for. I knew that I needed to encourage people every day with God's word so that we would all have a believing heart. As we're about to start this year of 2021, I still want to encourage us with God's word so that we would all have a believing heart. Because as we believe God, then we will please God. And I want us all to be pleasing before the Lord. So during this year, I would like to invite you to join me every day as we look into God's word. Instead of a 2020 New Testament challenge, our time together will simply be called the Word for 2021. As we're about to begin this new year, I would like to invite you to join me to start in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is one of 5 books that Moses wrote. As the Israelites were wandering for 40 years, God would meet with Moses face to face as a man meets with his friend. During those times, God spoke to Moses and gave him instruction as exactly what he needed to write. And so Genesis gives us many different things that we need to know. First, it gives us our worldview. As believers, we need to have God's mind as we look at the world. And so God gives us the worldview that as believers we should have. Not only that, He gives us background to understand life, both the physical life and our spiritual life. In the book of Genesis, we also see the creation of God's people. God chose a group of people that He would use to deal with all of humanity. God wanted to bless everyone through the Hebrews. And so God chose this small group of people to be His people. And from this group of people, we now understand God's plan for all people. Someone might ask, why do we study the Old Testament? The answer is given to us by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. In chapter 10, he's talking to us about the history of the Hebrew people. And there in verse 6, he said, these things occurred, everything that happened with the Israelites, these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. And then he continues on and he says in verse 11, these things happened as examples and were written down as warnings for us. As we look at the Old Testament, we understand our past. Because if we don't know our history, we are destined to repeat it. So we need to read the Old Testament to understand what took place in the past. We need to learn from the past. Not only that, we need to understand that with every choice, there is a cost and there are consequences. Throughout the Old Testament, we see people making choices. And with every choice, there was a cost. And with every cost, a consequence. So what we need to do is read the Old Testament and learn the principles that we need to understand so that we can then apply them to our life. This year, I would like to invite you to join me in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis, we will learn our worldview. We will have more of an understanding of the spiritual life and the life that we live today. Plus, we'll understand God's plan for all of us. It's going to be a wonderful journey together. So, starting tomorrow, join me as we begin Genesis chapter 1. Thank you in advance for being part of the Word for 2021.